Hi everyone, my name is Markus Pietzka and I would like to welcome you to our today's INiTS SCALEup Talk. Our guest is Marcus Lebesmühlbacher, and you brought something which I would like to show our audience. It's a black box, and I hope you can see it. Holloid here, it reads. Marcus, what is it about? Please tell us.
Thank you. So this is our breakthrough invention inside for holographic microscopy. And it's a tiny device for process monitoring of microbial processes. And it works automated, inline, 24/7, in real time with a very high throughput that practitioners in the food industry, the chemical industry, the pharma industry, or in environmental monitoring can see what happens on a microscopic level with yeasts, microalgae, bacteria or microplastics and many other particles, what happens in real time and how do they need to intervene in the process or not to optimize the outcome.
Mm-hmm. And what is so disruptive with this technological approach?
We combine the strengths of microscopy and other high throughput technologies by providing a details of each object, of each cell in the volume. So we see thousands of bacteria or microalgae or yeasts in real time, automated, integrated in a flow of goods. And we see all the details of these objects. And that's not something you have with any other technology.
Mm-hmm. And what does this mean for food industry, pharmaceutical industry, and so forth?
So this means that currently, if they're in the food industry, there's a big disruption away from traditional value chains where companies cut down primary forest, they plant soybeans there, they feed them to pigs, then they slaughter them, and then you make sausages from them to get your protein on the plate. And there seems, and hopefully there is a big shift to more sustainable production processes of proteins and the nutrients that we need. Mm-hmm. And many of those alternatives rely on fermentation and bioprocesses in bioreactors. Mm-hmm. But in order to get those processes right, you need to understand them, you need to monitor them, and you need to do so efficiently and affordably. Mm-hmm. And there's a big lack of the right monitoring technologies. So you would have to need an army of highly trained microbiologists to analyze samples. And this is kind of holding back this disruption, this urgently needed disruption in the food industry, basically to save the planet. And we hope that with this technology, we can make an important contribution for this transition. And there's similar transitions also in the chemical industry going on. When you think that all kinds of plastics and other products, they're typically produced with lots of heat and lots of pressure. So huge amounts of energy. If you think about the biggest chemical plant in Europe, they have the same gas consumption as the whole of Switzerland. And that's because they work with traditional chemistry. And some of these, or many of these processes, can be replaced by bio-based processes, which are much more resource efficient. Mm. But then again, you need to understand the microbes. Mm. And I can tell you more examples. Think about the COVID pandemic. The whole world was looking at the pharma industry. How quickly can they produce a new vaccine and get it to the market and scale? And those vaccines, again, are produced with bacteria in bioreactors. Well, last summer, when we think about environmental monitoring, we had a huge catastrophe in the river Oder, where 50% of all life in the river died because the authorities and no one knew what's happening in the river. But if you would monitor the river 24/7 real time, then you could react much quicker and save a lot.
Marcus, as far as I know, you are not a physicist. You are actually, you've been trained in financing. You've worked for investment companies such as AWS and i5 Invest. How come that you co-founded such a deep tech company?
Mm-hmm. Well, actually already before finishing my studies, I thought or dreamt about becoming an entrepreneur. And probably that's already why I went into startup financing and also worked for other startups before. And I think now it's kind of the final step. Because when you try to have a really big impact, I think financing is an area where you can have a lot of impact. But then really founding a company, being an entrepreneur is I think one of the options, especially when you have a business background, where you can have the most impact.
And did you screen systematically for startups that were looking for a team member with your background, or how did you discover, or how did you come to each other?
And not really systematically, though I think I had a good idea in which direction I want to go and in which direction I do not want to go. And from my previous experiences, I got the impression that the most intriguing companies and those where I think the odds for success are best, and most importantly those who create the most value in terms of impact, are quite often scientific companies with inventors or highly scientific co-founders on board, and quite often university spin-offs.
Cool. INiTS has a program which is called StartIP, and in this program we try to matchmake technologies with founders. So actually your example is a rather a typical example for this matching program. What criteria were important for you, or were important for you to decide to go with Holloid?
I think my decision criteria were very similar to what a typical impact VC might have. So I think, of course, something that really has an impact, that's really useful for society. What I personally care about a lot is environmental protection, in particular climate change, but also biodiversity. And then having a really strong founding team. And then for me personally, obviously, more important than for any investor would probably be is how I get along with the other co-founders. And here I found that already in the very first meeting, they showed me the device, or the first prototype. I did have no idea what this is. And even after they explained to me, I had no idea what this really is. But then we went for lunch and we discussed a number of different topics, including the technology, but also about general topics and worldviews. And that's where we found that there's really good match.
So the chemistry was fine. And what were the most important criteria for you that you wanted to have assessed before really committing 100% of you to the project?
Well, in my previous experience, when working at startups, and I actually attempted already to co-found the startups 7 years ago in Singapore, and that didn't really work out, largely because we didn't agree at the very beginning about the very basic terms of working together, like who owns how much in the company and who has what to say in the company. And then the second point was the IP situation. Because I've worked with and for a number of startups before who really failed later on because they didn't get those important questions right in the beginning. Okay,
I would like to hook on here. So the IP, as far as I know, is from the Boku in Vienna. Was it difficult to get an agreement with them?
With them in particular, it was surprisingly easy. But I wouldn't advise anyone else to assume that it's going to be easy. So what was very important, and I think what was very well managed from our side and theirs, is that we had particular interests and needs, and we both put our cards on the table and said what we really need, what is crucial. Then, of course, we did some research about the most important terms and how we can argue for them. And then, luckily, and thanks to them, also to the whole team at Boku, and in particular to Michaela Amstetter-Wisocznik. They were quite fast in replying and quite efficient in kind of finding the right way, the agreement that works for them and us.
Did you involve a lawyer from your side?
We talked to lawyers at the beginning, and we got in touch with some IP expert lawyers while negotiating. And then for the agreement, we hired a lawyer, but actually all the terms, or most of the terms, were negotiated before. So the lawyer was not there for negotiating, not to defining the deal terms, but basically for reviewing and making sure that we didn't overlook anything, that it's kind of not a time bomb.
Yeah, okay. And the second point you said was very important for you was that you came to a decision on how to distribute the shares. I had a look in the company register, and I think you own 32.0 what else percent of the company. How did you end up here?
Yeah, as I thought and experienced before, that defining the shares of each co-founder for a startup is pretty hard and also an intense negotiation. And as I said before, I think it's one that you have to have at the very beginning, but still it's not easy. And when researching on this topic and how to approach it, I came across one interesting aspect which said that the dissatisfaction of any given co-founder quadruples over time. So even when you're relatively happy at the beginning, chances are high that you'll be much more unhappy later on. So my approach, and also what I told my co-founders to be at the very beginning, was no one must be more unhappy than 10%, or everyone needs to be more than 90% happy with the initial agreement. Right. Otherwise, you'll be very unhappy later on, and this will could seriously damage the whole company. So then I really did my best to find a very diligent approach. I didn't find anything, so I created a model where we thought, what defines a successful business? And came up with different criteria that we could divide between the different co-founders. And all those criteria together had to make up 100%. So if you think of a successful company, especially a university spin-off like ours, it's defined by the initial idea, by the further development of the technology, but then also by business management, market insights, and business know-how. And then the question is, how do you distribute those, and who contributes what? And we brought all this into one big table, and then had a long session, 3 or 4 hours, where we went through every single point of every co-founder, and then the overall structure was, some parts were already there, like the initial technology, the initial idea, and a bit of market sounding. And most of the value was to be created in the future. And there we said the future value to be created is the product of capability times commitment. So if you're very capable, but you're not 100% into the company, it turns out to be less. If you're not very capable, but totally commitment, you also don't get full points.
Okay, I see. Yeah.
Of course, if the viewers are interested and they reach out to me via LinkedIn, I could discuss sharing my template in an anonymized form.
I think that's a very tricky part. You have to think very thoroughly through at the very beginning. As you said, people become dissatisfied, and when they become dissatisfied, that might result in a big damage in a company. Yeah.
And the good thing is, if you push yourself to having this hard negotiation at the beginning, you also get to know the others better. And when you can negotiate the very hard things at the beginning, you have also better chances of negotiating hard things later on.
Yeah.
And then also by documenting this decision process in detail, you can also then refer back to it in case someone at some point in time becomes dissatisfied.
Okay. There are 4 founders in the company. There's the 4th founder is a woman. How did you come? Or why did you decide to have a 4th founder in the team, and how did you find her?
So, to provide the context, there's 2 inventors behind the technology, both from the University of Life Science and Natural Resources in Vienna, so Boku. And I joined them so that it was free. And then we started a bit of market sounding, negotiating the patents, having a first round of negotiating the setup and share distribution. But then some months into starting this, and also when we were in INiTS already, we got more and more feedback from different sides that there's some kind of a gap in the founding team, that we have this very much inventor type of people with very much a university background, and then we have me, the total business guy. And the feedback we got that it would be really good to have another person with a very strong technical background, but still someone who knows the startup side, who knows product development, who knows technical sales. So we started actually writing a job post to recruit that person, while we already had the right person on our minds. And we were very lucky that this person, our current co-founder, Pina Frank, she already worked before with our co-founders, Eric and Peter. She even did her PhD with our co-founder, Eric, who's a professor at Boku. And they, from the beginning, said that she would be the perfect match. And we were very lucky that we just approached at a very perfect moment. And it was a kind of start to finish win for her and for us.
Yeah. And did you do this magic, your magic model? Did you do this with her, or did she onboard afterwards?
We first did it without her, and then we did it again.
Okay, cool.
So we just throw it to the bin and say, okay, we start from scratch, and yeah.
Okay, cool. Marcus, so now we have talked about what the product is about, a little about the history, how the team came together. And you also mentioned that you are an alumni of INiTS. How did you benefit from INiTS?
Well, in a number of ways. But most prominently, I think, is one example that you pushed us to do market sounding early on. I think that's something you should do anyway. But you also kind of insisted a lot, and you gave us this methodology how to approach potential customers and users. So that's what we did. And that's actually what led to this kind of product. Because initially, we wanted to produce lab devices, where we sell in one lab device for €500,000, where we are in a quite a different market, and where our USPs are still strong, but not as strong as with this product, with this business model.
Yeah, Marcus, INiTS was not the only incubator you were accepted. You have been also to EIT Food and one of the accelerators or incubation programs of the TU Munich. How do they compare?
Well, some have really an industry focus. Others have a kind of an industry focus. And another aspect is some are for free, and some even gave us money. So EIT Food even gave us a budget, and is obviously focused on the food industry. Then programs from Unternehmertum at TU Munich In this case, it was the Entrepreneurs Program. They are kind of focused on industrial B2B startups, where we fit in. And this is then also reflected in the curriculum and also in the mentors and the intros they give. And then we also participated and benefited from a number of other programs, like EIT Manufacturing, obviously with intros to the manufacturing industry. Then it was Start Life in Wageningen in the Netherlands. They did an excellent job as giving us intros to food-focused investors with a 100% response rate. Very, very interested talks afterwards. And then there's the Drinks Innovation Campus and the Global Entrepreneurship Center, and probably I've forgotten some.
Okay, so you knocked on a couple of doors.
Yeah, and they basically, they're all opened. Yeah. One I forgot was the Venture Lab Food at TU Munich. Okay. And they're very much food focused again, and had a very good one-on-one coaching. And I found that one differentiator, apart from good intros, is really targeted one-on-one coaching. So the more targeted the service, the higher the value was typically.
Okay. And you said that EIT Food also provided some funds. Did they take shares?
No. Right. That was kind of a knockout criterion for us. We also were approached by a number of accelerators or incubators who take shares, but we basically immediately rejected those requests.
Okay. Okay. Good to know. I think we are at the end of our interview, and no, there's one question, because we have been talking about the incubation programs, and now let's have one or two questions regarding how you are financed. And I think you are currently raising funds. What are your experiences with the fundraising, especially with regards to the changed macroeconomic situation?
So we are kind of raising funds, so we're not really pushing the fundraising process with investors, mainly because we're just very busy and it's not super urgent yet. But we've been approached by a larger number of investors, and we've approached some. So far we've been very successful in acquiring grants, and we've put in considerable money ourselves. So that's why we're in a reasonably good position. But yes, we are then with a medium run perspective raising, and in active talks with a number of investors. And yes, I can confirm that the investment climate with VCs has obviously deteriorated in the last year. But then it's important to differentiate between the life cycle or the life stage of the startup. So I think it's not as bad in seed as it is in Series D or E when everyone's thinking about an IPO. And then there's a lot of differentiation between different use cases and industries. So I think if you're in crypto, you'll have a very hard time now. But if you're in biotech and AI, where we are, things are going quite well. The same is true for impact.
Okay. And now we are at the end of our interview, and I would like to ask you to give one or two recommendations to our aspiring founders. Is there anything you would like to mention?
Well, I think we covered some important aspects. So one is discuss the very critical aspects at the very beginning, like your shares and how you deal with your co-founders, and also think about terms like cliff and vesting. And then make sure you got the IP situation covered. And then most importantly is do what you think is really useful. So I think if you're an investor, you should basically always be an impact investor, because everything else is meaningless.
Thank you, Marcus, for your time and for the insights you provided.
Thank you for having me.
You're welcome. Dear audience, I would like also to thank you for watching us, and I hope we see you at our next INiTS SCALEup Talk. Bye-bye.